Hello, I'm Tom Parker, and welcome to Voices from the CEPS Ideas Lab. In this episode, I spoke with Julia Poczse. Julia is a trained lawyer and research assistant at the Justice and Home Affairs Unit at CEPS, where she works on projects related to non-discrimination, irregular migration, asylum, and civil dialogue. During our interview, we discussed democratic accountability, ethical conduct, and how to protect the rule of law in the EU amidst rising far-right influence. I hope you enjoy the episode. Okay, we're live. Hi, Julia. It's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Well, look, I want to discuss democratic accountability at EU level. Why is ethical conduct a rule of law?
Yeah, I think it's a common misconception that ethical conduct is something that is moral, like it's a moral philosophical issue.
Yeah.
There is, of course, a moral element to it, but mostly it is a rule of law issue because the rule of law demands that public servants, like members of the Commission administration, but also political figures, elected leaders, they are public servants, which means that they not only must serve public interest, but they must also be accountable to the public. So in that way, it becomes less of a question of what are our ethics, what are our morals, but certain behavioral standards are not there to appease some arbitrary moral philosophy ideas, but to actually show that the people that we elected, the people that serve our interests, are actually meeting those interests. They actually not serve their own ideas of what is supposed to happen to the EU, but that they do the work that they are meant to do. So accountability in that way is about transparency. It's about actually serving public interests and being open and transparent about the work that they carry out on our behalf. And it's in the power of the people to demand this information if it's not given freely. So in that way, ethical conduct helps reinforce the rule of law and ensure that our democratic rights are respected.
I mean, it seems absolutely normal that would be the case, and it's a shame and a strange phenomenon that it isn't. Why? And why hasn't it not been this discussion before, or in fact had the results of it?
I think the problem is that there is a level of accountability, but it's simply not enough. I'm pretty sure that you heard about certain scandals in the recent past, Pfizergate for one, but also other things. Pfizergate, there is a whole case at the European Court of Justice because of these illicit texts between the Commission President and a corporate giant. So the issue is that the rules are simply not strict enough. There is still room for revolving doors, for conflicts of interest, and even for criminal activity like corruption and fraud. And the reason why these rules are not strict enough is because there is an incredible degree of fragmentation in also the rules, but also the actors that enforce the rules. So you have different bodies enforcing ethical conduct rules in the Commission, in the Parliament, in the Council, and also elsewhere in the institutions. And then there is a difference between EU staff, the public servants who are officials, and the public servants who are elected political figures or unelected but still political figures. So there is staff and then there is the members. And the thing about members is that there is no one common rule book. They all have different rules, or if there are any rules, then they are widely different and they also are enforced differently, which leads to a whole range of behavioral standards across the institutions. So what needs to happen is there should be strict rules, but the enforcement should also be uniform.
Well, I was about to go on to if you're looking to reform this whole area, what are the priorities when it comes to reformation of?
Yeah, so it should be done by an institution that's fully independent, structurally and legally. Now, you might have heard about the so-called ethics body, which is a new interinstitutional body that is supposed to be independent, except it's not fully independent, and the common rules that it will come up for members are not going to be binding. So these are going to be recommendations. You can abide by them, but you can also choose not to, and there will be no consequences whatsoever. So that needs to change. The body should not only be independent, but it also should come up with binding rules that are enforced properly across all institutions the same way. So that means actually having an institution that can do an enforcement of the rules, but also sanction violations. And that's not something that exists in this manner. So my idea is to propose a new institution, to set up a new institution that will do just that, and it will combine all of the different players that sort of fill different but kind of also overlapping roles in the landscape, put them all together under one roof, and have an institution that's sort of a one-stop shop. It does it all. Comes up with the rules, enforces them, investigates them, reports on them, and sanctions them. It will be a lot simpler than whatever we have now, which is, as the ombudsman used to say it, the previous ombudsman, Emily O'Reilly, that it's a patchwork. So what we need is a simpler, more streamlined and stronger institution.
I absolutely agree. I think that's an amazing idea. Have you got a name for this institution yet? You must have an acronym ready.
An acronym? No.
Yeah.
I call it Ethics Authority.
Okay.
I think the word
Love
authority is meant to convey the strength and power that I want this institution to have.
A bit slightly Orwellian, isn't it? The sort of ethics authority. But okay, I want to move on to looking at the transparency and accountability of institutions anyway.
Yes.
How can more transparency and accountability be delivered in the realm of ethical conduct and lobbying while ensuring civil participation?
So on the one hand, you have transparency rules, for example, in the parliament, and a lot of MEPs are very diligent in disclosing their meetings and their interests, but not all of them do it 100%. Some things remain hidden. And then you also have the council and the permanent representatives of the member states that have very different and very low transparency obligations. So a lot of lobbying, for example, when it comes to influencing legislation, goes on with the permanent representations and in the Coreper, and that's not being disclosed properly. And the same goes for the Commission. The Commission also has transparency rules, and they do disclose the meetings and the calendars and the agendas of commissioners. There's very little information about the actual things that are discussed in these meetings. So beyond just saying, okay, I met this and this lobbyist on this and this day, there should be a bit more information, like the agenda. I'm not saying the minutes, like every single second of the meeting should be published, but the politicians themselves should be obliged to be more transparent, because these meetings with lobbyists, for example, they influence European legislation. And sometimes, especially when it comes to corporate lobbying, it might not be in the interests of the majority of the general public what these corporations are lobbying for. So the content, a summary of the content of the meeting or the agenda should be public, is something that I feel would be nicer. At the same time, there's also agencies. You have the biggest agencies, Frontex, the European Coast Guard agency who guards the borders, the external borders of the EU. They have a transparency register, but it's also, if you look at it, there's very little logged in there, and we know that...
Not that transparent.
No. So transparency shouldn't be selective. Everything should be out there.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be a question of, is it a corporate lobbying meeting or is it an advocacy meeting with a civil society organization? Everything should be out there, and people should be able to access this easily and see, okay, so these are the companies that influence the legislation that affects me.
Well, one particular bit about this accountability is the rise of the far right in Europe, and there's been another area that you've been looking at specifically. So in the wake of this far right influence in Europe, how can pro-Europe actors protect the rule of law and be more accountable?
Yeah, so the thing is, why we should be talking about the far right is precisely because of the rule of law, because it's not just the far right who commit ethics violations or misconduct. I mean, people have told me, okay, but what about Pfizergate? That was an S&D MEP. That's true. So ethical misconduct is not necessarily an issue on the right. It's a universal issue. But the thing about the far right is, and I mean the far right beyond the cordon sanitaire, I mean the ECR, the patriots, the sovereignists, they are not necessarily interested in upholding the rule of law. They are Eurosceptic, which means that they seek to dismantle the rule of law at the European level because they want more national sovereignty. So in that way, they are also not necessarily interested in submitting themselves to stricter rules on accountability because, well, that's kind of counterproductive, is it? And I mean, a lot of MEPs, even the ones in the center and on the left, feel that too much scrutiny into their work is not of interest to them. So with the far right, accountability and insisting on transparency and ethical conduct is one of the ways to uphold the rule of law. And the more far-right MEPs there are going to be in the parliament, the more of them will sit on the council, the more commissioners we will have from far-right parties, the riskier it is for the rule of law, because it's precisely this system of checks and balances, accountability, and the prohibition of arbitrary discrimination. These are the things that they want to get rid of.
Yeah.
So to have a stricter, more, a better system for oversight will allow them, or at least hamper their efforts to completely take over the European institutions and enact an agenda that's not compatible with the rule of law. So yeah, what I mean is that the far right, a lot of their policies are built on hatred and on exclusion, and they seek to institutionalize it. So they seek to enact legislation and institutional structures that are not based on the rule of law and on democratic principles, everything that we have set out in Article 2 TEU. And if we let it happen, if we let them run amok within the institutions, then we will lose what the European integration is all about. So accountability is just one small step in a bigger scheme to protect all the values and principles that the EU was built upon. So we can't go backwards. We can't go against the grain of integration. So to protect what we have and to safeguard what makes Europe so special, what makes this integration so special, all elements of the rule of law should be respected and strengthened, and that includes accountability.
Wow, this is an amazing topic, and thank you very much for speaking with me today. Yeah. Best of luck with the Ethics Authority. Yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.